Audio Jungle.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Dan Hobbs. Dan is the co-founder and CEO of Protex AI, a software development company that uses AI to enhance safety in the workplace. Dan has started two companies and has over 10 years of experience in software development. Dan, thank you so much for joining me.
No worries. Good to be here.
So I'd like to start, we start every episode the exact same way. Could you explain what it is you do as if you were speaking to a 6-year-old?
Sure. That's usually how I try to speak to not everybody in the sense of because they're all 6-year-olds, but from a sense of there's a really cool Mark Twain quote that said, "I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead." I don't know if you've ever heard that one. So it's a lot harder to write things short. But yeah, so what we do at Protex, a bit about me. So I did a economics degree in Trinity College in Dublin. Now live in Boston. But started Protex about 4 years ago with my buddy Kieran. Like you mentioned, we link in with existing CCTV to look at behavior patterns that lead to accidents using AI. So something a little bit different to what we were used to. But it's been a cool journey so far. I can dive into it a bit more in a little while.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being here. So, again, kind of start with kind of going over your career path. How did you end up here? You touched on it briefly. You started this company with your friend, but how did you end up in this position, coming out of Trinity and ending up in the position you're in today?
Sure. So I guess the weird thing about my background is I've never really had a resume. I've always kind of just started things myself. So I had like you mentioned, a previous company called Better Examinations, which I started when I was in my third year of university. Um, Prior to that, though, maybe for context, when I was in uni, I thought that I was going to learn French, and then go and work in the EU in Brussels. I was convinced I was going to do that. Um, but then I realized I was really bad at French. So I kind of killed that dream. So I needed something else to do. So my another friend of mine, my previous co-founder James, was doing a project around exam management and exam software for high school and university students, and I was like, that's kind of cool. So I got involved very early on, and we built that business in our last year and a half of university, and then onto a year after college, and then we sold that in 2019. So I kind of experience in building startups and starting companies. And that was my first real job. I worked in a bar and stuff like that. I worked in a promotion team, doing face painting and random stuff like that. But it was my first job was my own startup, and then I stayed in that company for a little while, for about a year and a bit. That bought us as part of an earnout, and then went on to found Protex with Kieran, who I've known since I was like 11 years old. So we go way back. We actually met at a national science fair in Dublin, being the cool guys we were. Um, and just kept in touch, and we were having a pint in a bar called Crows in the south of Dublin, and he was doing a PhD in this computer vision, this AI for cameras. And we were like, hey, let's put that somewhere cool, and that's where Protex came to be.
Very cool. Very cool. This next question will kind of be, you have an extensive career, and I'm kind of make short of it and ask what's one piece of advice that kind of helped you lead you to the success you're in today? Maybe that was, drop French, but maybe something else.
Yeah, do you know what? I think I'm a big believer, which it sounds so weird given the type of company I'm in and what I'm doing, but personally, in my own personal life, I don't really make many plans past like 6 months. Um, and I think it's really stemmed to help me what I do now with kind of the success we've had to date, but just in general, because I make the most of where I'm at right now. And I tend not to get too caught up in what's going to happen to me down the line. We've had a lot of things happen in our family where plans have changed and whatnot, with with some things, or like some of our friends that passed away, unfortunately. They had these big plans, these grandeur plans, and then they never got to do them. That really stuck with me growing up. So I about 5 6 years ago, I was just like, I'm just not going to make as many plans anymore. These 5 10 year plans, to just live for for what I'm doing right now. And I think since doing that, you kind of give your all every single day because um, not putting it off to tomorrow. And I really feel like that's been core to how I've been able to just give things a go, um, and try new things and sign up for everything. I always say yes to plans. I've got some really good friends who just will sign me up for stuff. It's like, hey, we're doing a marathon in 2 months. I'm like, cool, let's do it. Um, I think that attitude stems not only in my personal life but also into business and has helped me to stick my neck out.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I think leads to living in the moment, right? It's kind of, sounds corny, but
Mhm.
it makes you focus, right? You can't, we're not promised tomorrow, as you prefaced. And yeah, no, it's great. I think I'll transition kind of to touching on, the industry of software development and artificial intelligence. As you've kind of had this career and you look at yourself, you look at the people you've worked with and, everyone in the industry, what are the traits of people who succeed in this field?
Good question. The funny thing is we did AI before it was cool. I like to think so. Before the whole ChatGPT wasn't a thing when we started. We only started. I remember we only started like 4 years ago. This company. It's not even like an old company. Um, for it, but like when we were pitching it, we had to explain what artificial intelligence was. We had to say what AI was. People didn't really get it. They're like, "Why did your website end in an AI?" And that was a bit wild to people. Even my mom called us Protex A1 until recently enough, So our job at the start was explaining what AI is. So I don't necessarily think like you need to be a certain person to get an AI. I think it's again, there's so much resource out there. Um, like I've seen people do like courses in AI now, like from a business side rather than a technical side is a different thing, but certainly from a business side, I'm like, why would people do that? It's so new anyway. All the information's out there for you. So I think a big thing is just like listening and researching yourself. You don't need to have a certain subset of characteristics nor a skill set from a business end anyway to get into it. It should be pretty natural. So the way I think about AI isn't necessarily like it's its own segment, its own part of the market. In fact, it's everywhere and it should be everywhere. From LLMs to using like your chat GPT to do an essay in college to things like that. Like it's absolutely everywhere that you shouldn't see it as like a segment you want to get into, but rather a foundational piece of knowledge that you should know going into any industry.
Yeah, I think it's whether we like it or not, it's definitely taking over. That's for sure.
Mhm.
With that, you touched on there how it's new, and you see new courses coming out for it. If you were to kind of go back and look at college, how should a college kid kind of, what are the skills and tangible skills somebody should be working on if they want to go into software development or artificial intelligence, whether they're going to take the entrepreneurial route or the join a company? What are those skills they should be really honing in on prior to graduation?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I had a couple of part-time jobs during college outside of me starting my companies, and one was working in a bar, busting tables, which I did for 2 years, and then the second one was working in a promotions team for a radio station. And they sound like two like fairly medial jobs that people do. But I think what it really taught me was just being able to talk to every type of person. I think it's a skill set that uh, a lot of people get to flex during university because they're so focused on their studies and getting into the library and getting their grades. Um, the soft stuff is really what from a business sense and from a being in a software company or starting a company definitely helps to win. So I coached the Trinity College women's soccer team for 8 years. Did it for free, loved it. One best job I've ever had prior to this. And um, what it really taught me was like how to motivate people, how to get along with different people, understand what people want in life, and how you can resonate with that. And that's probably a skill that a lot of people in business don't get the flex until they leave university, or if they're doing a part-time job. Really try to focus on things that are client-facing rather than something that's in a back office. I really think that's a muscle people don't get to flex very often, but certainly something that they should do if they want to get into the business world, let alone an AI company.
Yeah, no, I think one of the key points, and I'll be repeating myself now as these come out, but a key point in every one of these is the people business, right? It comes down to people. It doesn't matter whether you're computers or manufacturing robots. It's always a people business before anything else, and I think that's a key point that I'm glad you touched on. I'd like to bring this kind of to the current state of your industry, and I don't think there's a better industry to ask these questions about than AI. You guys are obviously in the news constantly. What are the pivotal changes affecting your industry? Might be better to ask what isn't affecting your industry, but I will ask what is.
Yeah. Um, I think just a sentiment of the market, so like how people approach it now. Um, I speak a lot internally about our job is to not, as much as AI is still a moonshot, if we can call it that. Our job as a company is to help people to bridge that gap so that it doesn't feel as much as a moonshot for our clients and our partners. So enabling them to pull it in a little bit closer. And I think that moon is getting closer and closer because people are becoming a lot more savvy with just what AI is, which is great for us. You know, we the likes of ChatGPT and Perplexity um, and Anthropic and all these huge companies that are have raised a lot of money. It means a lot of attention is going on to it. When a lot of attention from the investment sphere, both in like the public market and private market, gets onto an industry, it not only that, but really good people start to look at that industry. So you get really great minds coming into it. So it's not only a case of people looking at it more, but I think people want to get involved with it a lot more, which means the talent pool is getting even better day by day because they want to get involved in AI and want to get involved in what the next the next big wave is. I think for us, we because we work with like factories and warehouses and things like that. Um, again, probably in the last decade, that was a really unserviced spot with regards to technology. So it was super manual. Still is really manual. Like a lot's done on paper. And then only in the last kind of 18 maybe like 36 months, people have started to really invest in AI and want it core to their strategy. And that's benefited us hugely because they want to get ahead of the curve. They know it's tangible. They know it's something they can get in the door. And they're using us to as a mechanism or as a vehicle to get to where they need to go.
Yeah, you touched on there the growing kind of talent pool that's coming into AI, right? How does that current job market look? Obviously, it's unclear. I'll start by saying that. But other than that, how does it look, especially for college graduates? You know, how does that job market look?
Mm. Yeah, I think and it's a really great question, which I've been asked quite a lot by college students of what should they be doing in order to get into the world now. Can they position themselves best in order to get a really good job in this space? I think a big thing to understand is that people aren't going to get replaced by AI, but people will get replaced by the people that know about it more than they do, which is a really interesting way to look at it rather than the case of, well, I won't do that job because AI is going to replace it down the line. I think what and how college students should look at the job market now is trying to become more comfortable. Like I said earlier, that AI is foundational. It's not a segment in itself. It's not an industry in itself. It's actually foundational to almost every industry now, or certainly will be. So the quicker you can get into the groove with that, the better. I've even like helped a couple of people on the job hunt recently, and what I've said is when you're going into job interviews, have a look what the company does, have a look at AI platforms, and try to figure out how they could use it. You know, go in and I don't mean in case of it's really specific to their industry. How can that company use ChatGPT more? Give some suggestions on it. So let's say you're going for a sales role, for example. You might say, okay, well, you go into a job interview, say, hey, look, how are you guys approaching AI? They might say, well, we're using it for XYZ internally. Cool. What about using like ChatGPT to research about companies more before you contact them instead of spending hours and hours going through websites and whatnot? So coming into conversations with prospective employers, do your research on them, number one, but also do your research on how you think AI could help more. Because I promise you, because everybody's at the same starting point, they're not much further along in the knowledge of AI than you would be if you research yourself. So you're able to really provide that insight and come in with fresh ideas. I think people are trusting the younger generation to tell them what to do a bit more when it comes to this type of stuff because we're more tech savvy. I'm putting myself in that bracket even though I'm 31, but I think it's an important thing, and they're trusting a lot more rather than the case of, oh, they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it pushes the narrative of this is still new. And I think I like the point you brought out of that they don't have an advantage on you with this artificial intelligence. You know, everybody's kind of on the same starting block. Sure, there's people who have, maybe been researching it for a while, but to the most degree, against other potential people who are, potential employees, you're kind of on the same starting block. So I think there's an opportunity to utilize it, and the advantage is yours to take. I'll push more into kind of how people get a job. And I know you touched on how this isn't kind of a specific industry more than it is an underlying to all industries. But again, kind of maybe more on the side of software development, people who kind of want to go into that side. Who are those type of people, and who are the people who should be kind of seeking a job if they're looking at themselves in college, and maybe they're thinking they want to move to Belgium and be in the EU. When should they kind of go, actually, never mind, I'm not too good at French.
Mhm. Um, Gosh, well, hopefully, like down the line, I don't even need to speak another language. You just have we'll have an earbud that you just translate back and forth into it. So it's still a dream I can get on that one, Alex, at some point. Um, I think from a software development side of things, again, it's going into software development's a little bit more specific than maybe into the sales or business side of things, where there's systems out there like we use a different platform like Devon AI, which is like a tool you can use to code faster, things like that. So again, looking at remember from an employer's perspective, they're always going to look at an employer's job is not to say, hey, I want to give you a chance just to improve you. It's how are you going to benefit my business? So if you can come in with, hey, I'm not even a really good coder, a really good software developer. I also know that these AI systems that can make things faster and more efficient for me as a worker, which means I can contribute more to the company. So always looking at it from the case of like, what am I going to bring to the company rather than what's this company going to do for me? That's kind of secondary to all these conversations. At the end of the day, when I hire someone or when anybody hires someone, is to see how they're going to benefit the company and all the people we brought in. We have an amazing workforce at Protex, but we spend time with them to really understand what gets them going, because we want to see if that can contribute to our growth first, and then I can see how it can contribute to their growth, and hopefully it's that symbiotic relationship with it. But you can't go in thinking, hey, this company's going to tell me what to do every single day, and I just have to follow the path. The best companies and the best people are able to kind of drive that success by coming in with those ideas. So I think as a software developer or a coder coming into it, definitely looking at what tools that they think will impact their first bits of job that will make them work faster, more efficient, and suggesting using them in their interview as well.
I want to touch on a point you kind of brought up there, the idea of a company and an employee working symbiotically. As a college student, university student, kind of approaches graduation, I think a lot of the pressure is kind of get a job and kind of whoever it is. But I'd like to kind of pivot that and say, from the other perspective, how should you be kind of picking your first company, your first boss, stuff like that? Because obviously those play a pivotal role in shaping your career. How would you kind of decide who are the bosses you should be working for? What's the company culture you should try and join early in your career?
That's a good question. I'll always be biased towards startups. I think you can learn so much. If there's any startups that do like graduate roles, you just get exposure to everything. Not necessarily directly, but even just sitting next to someone or talking to, it's a lot easier to understand how it works. And because they grow so rapidly, startups in the early stages, you get to see um how different functions work, and that's really important when you grow. If you're in bigger companies, you get like more attention in regards to like enablement. But I think from being thrown into the deep end, startups are like the best places um, to work, to learn, just learn loads. Some of our like younger employees definitely have benefited from that and have gone on to other jobs and have brought a lot of experience with them. And I just did a reference for one of them recently. And they're like, "Gosh, it's crazy how much stuff she's done for you guys. She's done a couple of jobs in between." They're just impressed with how much work she's actually done for being so young. When it comes to working with a boss, I think the ones that are the best are just the ones that give you time, that you can go for, that are approachable, that you could go for coffee with. I think Steve Jobs has his beer theory. If you can't go for beer with an employee or a boss, then you're really not in the right place. Um, it's funny how much culture and being culture fit makes a difference. We could have the best person here, but if they just don't believe in our culture and what we're about, it doesn't work. Doesn't matter how good they are. So I think when you're coming into workforces, really get to know the people as people. Ask them about themselves. Ask them what gets them going. Um, Ask them how they view success in their lives. And if that resonates with what you're about, awesome. It's like dating a little bit. Um, you got to get the vibe going before you can go to the next step with them. And I think that's the same happens in the job sphere too.
Well, Dan, brilliant advice. As we close this interview, I want to ask you one last question. If you could go back and give your college age 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be?
Um, you know what? I think I'm pretty lucky in the sense that like I had my own company, things like that, and started off. But I actually think if you when you graduate, go travel for 2 years, just get out, go meet lots of different people. I got a very good family friend called Kyle, and he just went off and traveled, and he's an awesome guy, and he's took his time. I think there's so much pressure to get into the job market and get going, which is important. Don't get me wrong, and maybe people have to do that, but where you can, try to find some space for yourself, um, to really grow as a person and come back um, into the fold with that. I'm lucky now. I get to travel with work and I get to meet loads and loads of people, but I know not everybody is in the same position as myself. So I think that's a really big piece. I'd suggest just go mess around for a bit and go travel. Um, and I think one piece of advice I got in kind of my mid 20s, which I wish I got earlier on in life was, you're climbing this mountain. It kind of stems to what I mentioned there. You're climbing this mountain the whole time. You got to turn around and appreciate the views every so often, and that's probably something I didn't do earlier on. I wish I knew that earlier. I was kind of kept going. It's like I got to do this, and it goes back to that thing I mentioned. Start making plans. I was like, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. Like you have there starting the ladder, but you got to turn around, and look back to where you came from a bit more, and be appreciative of it. And not many people get to do that or do that in general. So I think that's an important piece of advice that I took on from one of my very good friends, in my mid 20s when I was going through a pretty crappy time, um, but really understanding that you got to where you are for a reason, and to look back and appreciate the path that you walked.
Dan, some great advice. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks everybody.